and we'll start here. So as I mentioned, Grizzlies win the playout, win their playing games, get the eighth seed. They play the Utah Jazz. Jazz are a team like you mentioned. I believe Donovan Mitchell is expected to be back for Game One. He's been out for a few weeks, I think, with the ankle sprain. But yeah, Jazz. I think they have the best record in the league too, right? Or is that the Sixers?
No,
Yeah.
it's the Jazz.
So Jazz have home court throughout the playoffs, so they have a first round. I'll go to you first. Who do you got here for this series, and how long?
I'm taking the Jazz. I This is another one that's hard for me to judge how long because we just don't know the status of Donovan Mitchell and like how healthy he really is. But I think they're really deep, and the teams that are really deep tend to fare pretty well, like at least in the first two rounds. Once you get to like the conference finals, that's when it's really just based on your star power. But yeah, I think with Joe Ingles, Jordan Clarkson, Bogdanovich, the way some of these guys have been stepping up in the absence of Donovan Mitchell, I think if they continue to have performances like that with Mitchell back, uh, I love John Morant, but I just don't know if the Grizzlies are going to have that same sort of firepower because even in that Warriors game, right, like John Morant and Steph Curry were going back and forth. But I don't know if I feel like the grit or the Jazz, unlike the Warriors, just have a lot more guys that can put up that 30 points that can go off any given night. And plus just the defensive presence that Rudy Gobert is. I I don't know if Jonas Valanciunas is or well, the Grizzlies necessarily have the lineups that they can fully utilize to expose a guy like Rudy Gobert, like we've seen in previous teams in the playoffs. I mean, they can run that small ball with like Jaren Jackson Jr. probably the five, and he's not small necessarily. Um, but yeah, I still just wonder if they have the coaching and the ability to really go at it. And also, once again, John Morant's first playoff series, who knows how he'll do. So yeah, I'm taking Utah. I'd say 5 or 6 probably because I do think the Grizzlies can probably sneak a game in there.
Here's my issues. I am worried about the Rudy Gobert thing, because regardless if it's Valanciunas or Jaren Jackson, even I feel like Brandon Clark will get a few minutes. All those guys can space the floor, and I think that's been an issue with Rudy in past years that teams have basically done that and taken away from the basket. I do worry about Donovan Mitchell coming back because although, like you mentioned, all those guys have been going off when now there's someone else back, Donovan will be back, and then now he's getting those other 20, 25 shots, and now you're not getting you know as many shots. It can be hard to find a rhythm, and I was gonna go Grizzlies in 7, but it's tough to do that, like you mentioned, and I think at the end of the day, the Jazz
The
will
Jazz are
figure.
just so deep,
I think they'll
man.
figure it out, but I think this is going to be a 6 or 7 game series. I think this is going to be one where you know, Grizzlies take game 1 or 2, kind of shock the Jazz, wake them up, and then Jazz take one at Memphis. Memphis they draw, so it goes to game 5, and then depending on how game 5 goes, I just feel like it's gonna be one of those series where like it's gonna wake up the Jazz, and Jazz are gonna have to jump into playoff mode.
Right.
And I do worry that it's going to take a couple games for Donovan Mitchell to get his feet under him. But by then, by crunch time, like I mentioned, by game 5, 6, and 7, he'll be back and ready to go. And we saw last playoffs, he was balling out. I mean, they did not lose because of him. So,
Right.
um, yeah, I couldn't go with my initial gut like I texted you the other night. Um, but I do think this will be a good close series. I hope so. Knowing my luck, I'll probably be wrong and they'll get swept. So um, there's that for that series. But that'll be a fun one to watch. But the next one, like we mentioned too, Lakers and Suns. Suns a 2 seed, Lakers a 7 seed. I think this is. Then they say this is the first time because of LeBron that the 7 seed's been favored over a 2 seed.
Yep.
So yeah. Shout out to our good friend Kyle here for the Suns. But who you picking here?
I want to hear you go first.
Okay.
I know who I'm taking, but I still just want to hear
I'm
you.
taking the Lakers. Here's the thing. I think CP3 and Devin Booker are playoff ready. I think they're ready to play. But there's no answer inside. And I'm not confident in DeAndre Ayton. I just don't. I think he's a solid NBA player. I'm not saying he's a bad player at all, but just not great defensively. We see him just kind of be passive at times. And for a guy with his build and the way he just looks, like he should be a lot more dominant. And maybe this series would be good for him in the long term. I think he needs this. He might be a trial by fire, wherever the phrase is. Because I think I don't. I mean, I know last time they play AD mostly at the four, he doesn't guard him. But
Mm-hmm.
regardless, I mean, with Drummond there, and he's gonna have to, I imagine, rotate to help on drives from LeBron and AD. And I don't think he'll be able to do that this series. I think So I think he'll be under the microscope basically this series. I don't want to say he's the reason they're going to lose, but with the Lakers it gets tough. It's just like once again I don't see how the Suns are gonna who are they gonna put on LeBron. Bridges okay, but once again Bridges isn't the biggest person. So if LeBron, like we kind of saw with the Warriors game, gets into more of the post up type things, that's where Bridges I think is gonna have problems. And then obviously they don't have anyone to guard AD. I know they threw Crowder on him I think a couple times and some other people, but we saw last playoffs with the Heat. The Heat couldn't they didn't have anyone to throw on him. I mean they had Bam, but then it took Bam away from other people. So I think Lakers win this. I think Lakers win this in 7. I think the Suns will come out, maybe win a game or two, but then Lakers, they'll make some adjustments. Or Lakers will still win at Phoenix. But regardless, I think this is going to be a 6 or 7 game series. But ultimately, I think the Lakers will win for the reasons like I said. Like you can't. It's just so. It's kind of like the Chiefs quandary in the NFL. Like, do you double Tyreek Hill? Do you double Travis Kelce? Like, what do you? You have to pick your poison there. And with the Suns, because they lack the horses, I don't think that they'll be able to. So there's my thoughts.
I'm either going to look like an idiot or I'm going to look like a genius, but I am taking the Phoenix Suns. The reason I say idiot or genius is because I still have legitimate concerns about LeBron's ankle.
Yeah.
I felt like it clearly bothered him in that Warriors game. I felt like he didn't have the same physicality and like willingness to drive that he normally does. I mean, he still did it, but there was just times where he was like settling for fadeaways and just different stuff that just felt like LeBron wasn't fully right. And I think that combined with the fact that I don't have a lot of belief in Andre Drummond and Montrezl Harrell and the lineups that they field where AD is not the center. I think if that is a prominent part of their game plan, I do worry because I think a guy like Chris Paul, at least on the offensive side, is going to be able to pick those dudes apart. I mean, just getting switches and all these kind of things. I mean, obviously having AD at the 4, he's still a force and it makes it hard because he can help and rotations and all these kind of things. But I just think that Drummond and Harrell specifically, Chris Paul and the veteran that he is, he's going to attack those guys all game long. Same with Devin Booker. And I think that Phoenix, they're motivated. I agree with you. If LeBron and AD are fully healthy and ready to go and all that stuff, like I said, I'm going to look like an idiot because those guys are going to come out and dominate because I don't think Phoenix has the defensive forces to stop those dudes. Even the size. When we saw what Andrew Wiggins was able to have success against LeBron, but that only lasts for so long, right? Like at some point, LeBron is going to be LeBron James. So it's, yeah, I just have concerns about the chemistry. I have concerns about the fits. I have concerns about the injury. And so I'm taking the Suns. I think if there's any time to play the Lakers and beat them, it's right now. Because I think the longer they play, the healthier they get. The more chemistry they build, the more they figure out what lineups to use and who to play. It's just going to be tough. And so, yeah, I think the Suns, this is their shot. They're going to do it. Also, I heard some crazy stat about them. It was like trying to take every team's record against teams that are better, 500 or better, but it eliminated back-to-backs. It eliminated any game where like a star player or a starter was not healthy. It eliminated any game. I don't know. It eliminated something else, but it basically was just trying to put like just head-to-head, two of the best teams. Health concerns were an issue. Rest was an issue. All these kind of things, and the Suns were like 18-4 in those specific games. which obviously, you take that as you will. It's the regular season, but the Lakers, in contrast, were 4-4, and I think the difference there is the Lakers they didn't have a lot of those games where they were fully healthy. It wasn't back to backs. They were playing against the elite talent. I'm not saying that the Lakers, LeBron, like necessarily need to, but I just don't think they've had the chance to like figure things out, like you said, with like DeAndre Ayton might have to trial by fire. Where they just haven't had the chance to figure out their team because they don't have Rondo. They don't have some of the guys that they had last year, JaVale McGee, Dwight Howard. So they don't have some sort of like the veteran stabilizing forces that they did in previous seasons, that when they don't really have an answer, they can throw those guys out there, the smart, savvy veterans, and they'll just figure it out. And so, yeah, I also wonder like how big of an impact can Dennis Schroeder really have when Chris Paul is going to be guarding him. So there's just a lot of things that I think the Suns they have the opportunity to do it, to knock the Lakers out in the first round and make everybody go crazy. And I'm gonna pick them. I'm gonna ride the Suns. I don't know how long the series goes, but I'm taking Phoenix.
Alrighty. So we'll see how that all pans out. Yeah, I think that'd be a lot of interesting series. This is a very good playoffs we got here. I think in contrast to other years, especially first round. But all right, going to the next one here. The Denver Nuggets, the 3 seed, hosting the Portland Trailblazers. Personally, I think I'm gonna keep this one short. I think Denver takes this in 6. Don't have any answers to Jokic really, and Michael Porter Jr.'s stepped up in the way that like we mentioned, he had to, and I just feel like Portland had to scrape and claw their way to get here. But once again, just like in previous years, really just CJ and Dame. It's just how many games can they win? Can those two win for them? And I just, I can only think maybe 2 or 3. We'll see if like guys like Nurkic will step up. He is a good defensive center and passer, but and there's a little bit of revenge factor maybe because Nurkic was a Nugget, started his career and then got traded. So I think at the end of the day, though, I think the Nuggets will win this one. But I do feel like this will be at least a 6-game series. I feel like Portland's going to hold serve, especially at home. But yeah, ultimately, no answers for Jokic and Michael Porter Jr. So I got the Denver Nuggets in 6 over the Portland Trailblazers. What about you?
Yeah, this one was a tough one, but I agree. The Nuggets, I feel like they just play really good team basketball, and that's a lot harder to disrupt than a Trailblazers sort of, I wouldn't say hero ball, but like they rely on Dame and CJ so much. Sometimes Melo steps up, sometimes Nurkic steps up, but they just don't necessarily have the reliable supporting cast to where Denver feels like one of those teams to where like any bench player can really just have a good game because of the system, because of Jokic's passing, because of just the way that they play, the style that they play. And team basketball tends to do really well, especially in these first rounds where you're not necessarily having to play against the LeBron and ADs and the elite level talent guys who are just going to overcome anything no matter what. I'm not saying Dame can't do that, but it just feels like every time we've seen Dame in the playoffs, like there's only so much him and CJ can really do versus some of these really well coached, well run teams. And so yeah, I'm agreeing with you. I'm going to take the Nuggets.
Alrighty, and then lastly, game that's going on right now: Mavs and Clippers. Clippers the 4 seed, Mavs the 5 seed. Yeah, try to make sure I got that right. Yeah, so a little rematch of last year's first round series. Yeah, so I'll go first. I think, and maybe because I'm not a big fan, but I think the Mavs. I know I said you don't win championships playing that way, but I think with Porzingis back, rested, and hopefully he doesn't get ejected for some BS reason this series like they did last playoffs. I just feel like this Clippers team is not as good as last year's Clippers team as a whole. And honestly, so yeah, I think that the Mavs win this one in 7. I mean, I still got to see it in the playoffs, Paul George. I know he's a very good player, but there have been times where he's fallen short. We saw it last playoffs. We've seen it before in Indiana. and in OKC. I'm not doubting number 2 as much as I hate him. I think he'll be solid, but other than that, I mean, it's like what else? Who? I mean, I know they have solid defenders, but like really Nicholas Batum, I don't think he's gonna he's gonna be okay, but he's not gonna win you a lot of games, things like that. And then on the flip side, I mean, like we saw last year, my main point is they had trouble with Porzingis. They didn't really, I know Zubac is a solid center, but Porzingis is another animal, especially when he's feeling his game and when he's on it. And I feel like I haven't watched much Mavs basketball, um, but when I do, I just feel like I hope that they give him more post up opportunities. I think he deserves more, and maybe it'll help. I think it'll help their offense overall, as opposed to okay, Luka, here's the ball, every possession. So, and I think that they'll make those adjustments. But regardless, it's a tough one. I could see it. Obviously, I could see the Clippers winning it, but I'm feeling a little risky, and I'm going Mavs in 7.
Yeah, the 4-5 ones are always the toughest to pick because it could just really go either way. If I had to pick one team, I'm gonna pick the Clippers,
Yeah.
just because I think the experience, Kawhi just being there, doing it before, even beating them last year. Obviously, I mean there was the different Porzingis stuff that was going on, but Paul George, I mean he had a horrible series and still won. So I think the Clippers, if I had to pick one, like I said, I'd take them, but I wouldn't be surprised if this goes 7 games. Paul George is already off to a really rough start. He's 1 for 7 in the first half right now. And I mean, he has 7 points because he's got some free throw opportunities, but I hope for his sake that he has a really good second half because if the media starts bringing up the stuff again, I wonder how mentally strong he would be to overcome it. Because we saw last year, he never found a rhythm. Um, so yeah, I don't know if he continues to have the slump and just get out of the playoffs anymore. It would suck because I actually really liked Paul George back when he was in Indiana.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm not like a Paul George fan or anything, but he had some awesome performances back in the day, and so it'd just be a shame to see at the latter half of his career that he's fallen apart because I mean, last year it was just an utter collapse, and so far right now in this first half of this game, it's looking like more of the same, sadly. Um, so if that happens, yeah, I could see the Mavericks taking it. But I do think that Paul George has had a really good season so far, and so I'm gonna bet that he has a much better series this year than he did last year. And so I think I'm gonna take the Clippers, but I think it'll be close regardless.
Yeah, and we'll see. But yeah, I do feel like also want to add Dallas. I feel like too. I know Josh Richardson isn't starting, but they just have a few more different role players that they can play around with than they did last year. They have a Josh Richardson um, coming off, and then Kleber's gotten a little better, and it seems like some of the role players have gone more accustomed to their role, especially Tim Hardaway Jr. Is accustomed to being a third fiddle slash just spark plug. So,
Right.
alrighty. So that wraps up our playoff predictions here. Also, we'll see how they go. But regardless, I'm very excited just to watch this first round and see how things go. And I love the fact that we have basketball like every night, basically multiple games. That's what I love about the first round, just because
Yep.
it's just something always on at all times. So, all right.
Let's hope we get more series like the Jazz Nuggets from last year's
That was a
first
great
round
series.
because
Yeah.
that made the first round fun.
I mean, yeah. I mean, there's always been a few. Sorry, let me go back. There's always been a few series that are just fun. I remember Rockets, Blazers. That was a fun series. The one where Dame ended them back when they had
Yep.
Chandler Parsons. I'm trying to think. There's been a bunch of other fun series, but
Yeah, which I would say if any of them aren't good, I would say the Miami Milwaukee one. We already know it's going to be good because they already had just a crazy game and they're really evenly matched teams. So,
alrighty, all right. So going to our last topic of the day, but not least,